welcome to wjlive. Today is Monday, May 2nd. It's starting to get a little hot here in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah, getting a little bit. We're starting to head into the hell season.
Starting to get there, but we've got some good stories we're going to bring for you today, and luckily we're just in this nice air-conditioned studio, so we don't have to worry about that too much. My name is Grant Atkinson. I'm a reporter here at the Western Journal, associate reporter. I was trying to decide if I was going to say associate or not. And
You could leave that.
You're
just a reporter.
Kind of stumbled, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I do reporting. I write stories. That's what I do with my day. Michael this is Michael Austin. He is my supervising reporter. So.
Yes, so I tell Grant to write stories and to talk to people and to do those things.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's what I do.
So that's a little glimpse into what we do on a regular basis. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to bring you some stories of the day. And the first one we're going to talk about kind of started breaking late last week a little bit. We didn't get a chance to talk about it very much on Friday's episode just because it was all kind of coming out. But that is a new disinformation governance board that the Biden administration has created. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announced this at the end of last week. And a lot of people immediately were referring to it as a Ministry of Truth.
Ministry of Truth, yeah.
From George Orwell's infamous 1984 dystopian novel. So basically, when they rolled this out, it got a lot of criticism. It sounded like it was going to be a suppression of free speech. Then on Sunday, Mayorkas tried to kind of quell those concerns. He went on Fox News and tried to explain what this board is going to be. And he said, I didn't do a very good job of describing this. He said, there's no question I could have done a better job explaining the purpose of this board. And the purpose, he said, is, quote, to combat disinformation that presents a security threat to the homeland. I don't know that really quells any concerns for me. I don't know about you, but...
Well, and the timing about this has all been pretty suspect as well, because apparently they've been working on this thing behind the scenes without anyone knowing for like a really long time now, like months and months and months. But they only decided to announce it right after Musk has basically acquired Twitter. He's as soon as that news comes out, then they say, "Oh, don't worry, all misinformation will be taken care of by this new government board." And this has nothing to do with Musk, but we're gonna quell all free speech, and we're gonna make sure that right wingers can't lie to you anymore.
It's hard to believe that would be a coincidence because, like you said, we didn't really hear anything about this, and it's not something. It's clearly they had it in mind. They have an executive director that they've named, which we'll talk about in a second. But this has clearly been a thought-out process. They've been working on it for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not like they were just like, this is happening today. It's clearly a calculated decision to release the fact that this is happening right around that same time as someone
it was literally like the day after I think the acquisition was announced.
Yeah.
That Psaki was talking about it, and
Psaki said that it's nobody should be against it because we're just fighting misinformation and we're just trying to keep lies from getting out there. So who's against that? It's like, okay, if that's what it actually was, then sure.
Maybe.
I mean, that'd be actually there'd still be probably some First Amendment questions, but at least it would be a little bit more justifiable if this was a non-biased board who's just trying to say if there are things that are objective lies, we're going to call them out.
Well, and, if there even is such a thing as an unbiased board.
Right.
And
I don't know that there is.
It always goes back to the Thomas Sowell question, which is who gets to decide? Who gets to decide? Apparently, it's going to be a bunch of unelected government officials that all have clear partisan agendas. So,
if there were an unbiased leader who could be a leader of this board, it would be pretty much the opposite of the person who has been named the executive director of this board. Her name is Nina Jankowicz, and we have a video. I can't really give you a better introduction than just playing this video, so we'll just go ahead and play this clip for you, and you can see for yourself.
Pondering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain. They're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote.
When I picture the Biden administration, they're bringing in all these interns that are like TikTok influencers, like that dude that wears a skirt.
Oh
and,
yeah, with the nails and the.
This is exactly the kind of woman that they would have in charge of such an important group.
I gotta
this
say,
does not surprise me even a little bit. This is the perfect Joe Biden pick.
I gotta say a couple things about this woman. First of
Just
all,
a couple?
A couple. I mean, we're gonna talk a lot, but just right off the bat, number one, I'm very impressed how she can say "hide a little lie" very fast. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's clearly,
She's had some sort of theater training.
Yeah, she definitely is a theater student. There are other videos that have come out, and I'm not really sure that I can get on board with criticizing it. There are videos of her doing songs that are from like theater, and she says some weird things, whatever. But like, okay, she likes Broadway, like that's fine. Everyone has their hobbies. Maybe she's a little bit quirky, like that's okay. That's not my issue with her. But the issue is the content of this particular song and what it says about who she is and the way that she's going to lead this disinformation governance board. I would say the first thing that jumps out to me about the things that she points out is that the two examples that she gives in that particular clip, both of them are opinions from people who would disagree vehemently with Joe Biden. Rudy Giuliani talking about Ukraine, and then people who say that COVID maybe isn't quite as deadly as the Democrats would have us believe. Those obviously are both disinformation that she's saying they're disinformation, and they're both coming from the right. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that there's a reason that she is focusing on things that she believes aren't true from the right, but meanwhile she's ignoring disinformation that might be coming from the left.
Yes, and there are, I mean, look, if we get a disinformation board that is appointed by Joe Biden and people like Jankowicz.
It's Jankowicz.
Jankowicz. There are about 100 things that are disinformation right now that the government will be telling us, no, that's not disinformation. Case in point, the Hunter Biden laptop story, which apparently Jankowicz, I think I said it right.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Apparently Jankowicz went on social media during one of the Biden-Trump debates and suggested that the Hunter Biden laptop story was just Russian disinformation, which we all know now. Even the New York Times is saying now, 8 months after the fact, that it was not Russian disinformation. In fact, that was Hunter Biden's laptop. Oh, I guess the emails are legit. Oh, I guess Hunter Biden set up a meeting with his then vice president dad and a bunch of Ukrainian business officials.
Yeah, I think to me that is the most jarring of the things that she has done of her track record, because sure, there are plenty of examples of disinformation coming from the left or straight lies coming from the left that she didn't call out and that she has refused to call out during her career as a disinformation expert.
Yes, that's she's made a career. She's a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center or Institute or something like that.
So as she's been doing this, she's ignored plenty of disinformation coming from the left. But I think even more jarring than that to me is this Hunter Biden thing, because she is calling it disinformation. She's supposed to be she's doing what is supposed to be her job, which is to call out disinformation, except what she's calling disinformation turned out to be 100% true. So she's not even qualified to say what's disinformation, because she clearly doesn't know what is and isn't true.
Well, look, so leading up to the 2020 election, Biden had this just incredibly massive media advantage, because, while the media was doing everything it could, while it was speculating as hard as it could that, Trump did this, the media was pushing out all this, fake Russiagate stuff. That turned out to be completely fabricated by Clinton officials. And, that wasn't disinformation. But when a negative story comes out about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, that's disinformation. And that's the exact problem here, is when you let these people determine what's disinformation and what's not, when they don't leave it up to you, when it's like, no, we're going to decide, and then you can listen to the experts, you can trust us, and we'll tell you what disinformation is. That's what happens. You get these people with agendas that start labeling things disinformation based on what will help them the most. And it's not just going to be the Hunter Biden laptop story. There are a million narratives that are completely false that this disinformation board will never say is disinformation. You got lockdowns, COVID lockdowns. For a long time, the CDC recommended it. The CDC claimed that anyone that said lockdowns weren't working was just spreading disinformation. Well, we're on the other side of COVID now. We know that places that had lockdowns and places that didn't had the same amount of COVID deaths and illnesses. If anything, the lockdowns just delayed it a little bit.
Yeah, and there's been multiple studies about the mental effects of a lockdown and how that has harmed people, and those also aren't being shared.
So it's quite possible that, well, you're going to have the same amount of COVID deaths, but if you lock down, you're also going to have deaths related to economic disaster. You're going to have suicides. You're going to have, starvation in developing countries. You're going to have all of this stuff. You're going to have mental health issues skyrocket. And also the same amount of people are going to die from COVID.
So you thing plus all
so
of that.
You didn't do much. So there's that. You got Russiagate. That's not disinformation, even though it was completely made up by a bunch of Clinton campaign officials.
And that's another thing that Jankowicz was sympathetic to. We'll say on her Twitter, she never specifically said the Russian hoax allegations about the 2016 election and the interference with Donald Trump. She never said it was true, but she sent some tweets indicating that she might believe that it was true.
And it's just so unbelievable, guys. Like, I don't think people realize there are officials in jail right now for feeding that stuff to the FBI. Like, this was a huge scandal. It was all fake, but it's not disinformation if somebody like Jankowicz is in charge. So you got that. And then you got more of the basic, like, totally bull crap narratives from the left, like systemic racism. Anytime two racial groups have different outcomes economically, that means there has to be some sort of racist force, unless you're talking about Asians who dominate all of us, in which case
count.
either it doesn't count or Asians are the most white of any of us, which is actually the argument that some of these people make.
Yeah.
But that's not disinformation.
Or even, as Ben Shapiro likes to talk about, Jewish people tend to be pretty successful.
Yes.
I mean, not to categorize all Jewish people in one category, but as a whole, they tend to be a pretty successful.
Well, if you look at, and this is just a small tangent, but if you look at the highest performing groups economically, you get Asians up there, you get Jewish people up there, and then you get Indian, like people from India. Those Americans do extremely well. There's so many groups that are above white. Oh, and African immigrants, not African Americans, but immigrants from Africa, from Nigeria, I believe. I might be wrong about that. There is a large region in Africa that does extremely well in America. So systemic racism doesn't exactly seem like what's going on there. Perhaps culture has something to do with it. Perhaps there's a bunch of factors. Perhaps hooking people on generational welfare is not such a great idea, but I guess that's just disinformation. A more recent example would be January 6th.
Yeah.
You had AOC, you had all the Democrats telling us it was a terrorist attack, telling us that 10 people were murdered by Trump supporters. Turned out something like 4 or 5, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but something like 4 or 5 people died at January 6th. They were either trampled or had drug overdoses. Nobody was killed by a Trump supporter. In fact, the only person actually killed was Ashley Babbitt, a Trump supporter who was shot by a Capitol police officer under what appears to be some questionable circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that there's a whole tangent we could go on there as well. But the point being, we are told that it's domestic terrorism, that it's the worst thing that's ever happened, that it's the baddest, the most terrible thing since 9/11, and it just wasn't true.
And if you're going to call out disinformation, you would call that out. But guess what? This board is not going to do that. In fact, they're probably going to be pushing a lot of these narratives. You got that. Oh, one of my favorite ones from recent weeks. Jen Psaki and Biden claiming that inflation, Putin is to blame for all of our inflation. You got the Russian inflation. Well, believe it or not, if you look at those, those graphs that have been put out week after week, inflation had skyrocketed long before, we were already on that trajectory before any of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So that's disinformation. But unfortunately, Joe Biden's not going to let his disinformation board say that.
And gas prices, too. I mean, I remember that goes along with inflation as well.
Yes.
But that's something they specifically tried to pin on Putin and on Russia. I remember September, October, when gas was going up from about, $3.10, $3.15 a gallon. It was getting up to about $3.80. And we were all like, wow, this is terrible. And that was before any of this Russia-Ukraine stuff ever happened. And now, I mean, if you see gas for that cheap, you'd be ecstatic if you saw gas under $4.
And everyone was warning Biden, if you shut down these pipelines, if you stop, drilling domestically, if you start creating all these regulations for people that want to drill, you're going to raise prices. And then it happened, and then he's like, "Oh no, wait, it was Putin."
Yeah,
so
it was Putin. It's okay.
So there's that. And then this is probably a good one to end on. My favorite piece of disinformation that will never be, called out by this disinformation board is the rhetoric that the 2004 and 2016 elections were stolen. So they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, if you say the 2020 election was stolen, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're a right-wing nut job." But if you say 2016 was stolen by Russia, if you say Russia colluded with Trump and stole the 2016 election, that's not disinformation. If you say, 2004 Republicans cheated and won Florida, that's not disinformation. But if you say 2020 was stolen, then you're spreading disinformation.
Yeah, then it's disinformation.
So this is why you just can't have a partisan or a supposedly unbiased disinformation board. They're just going to be selling you one side of the narrative. And even if they try to split things down the middle, well, that's a bias to the middle. Like you have to, how news has always worked in this country, all right, dating back to like our founding, was you would have news outlets that were selling news from one political perspective, and then you had other news outlets that were selling news from another political perspective. It wasn't until the 20th century that these, big organizations got this weird idea that, we can be unbiased, nonpartisan news. There's no such thing. Everyone has a worldview bias, and this disinformation board will spread disinformation. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I think that's the danger of having a disinformation board and having the president have the ability to name somebody who can then decide what is and isn't disinformation. And that's actually a sentiment that our very own Nina Jankowicz agreed with just a couple of years ago. So we're gonna play a clip now in which she's saying that the executive branch should not have the power that she now has.
Imagine that, with President Trump right now calling all of these news organizations that have inconvenient for him stories that they're getting out there, that he's calling fake news, and now lashing out at platforms. I would never want to see our executive branch have that sort of power.
She wouldn't ever want to see the executive branch have the power to say that that is fake news or disinformation. But if the executive branch wants to appoint an unelected official who agrees with everything that person believes, and then that person says disinformation, that's totally fine, I guess.
Well, if the executive branch is going to give me a paycheck, then maybe we can do that. Then I think it's okay.
Then it's totally
as long as I'm getting paid some way too much money, and as long as the taxpayers
are
footing the bill.
I don't even want to know what her salary is going to be. It's got to be ridiculous.
Yeah, it's got to be crazy.
So that is, what happens. That's the point that she was making, is the point that we are now trying to make. It's just that she has shifted, and we have stayed where she is because we understand the value of free speech and the dangers of having somebody who can be the arbiter of truth, basically.
Yeah, and this story was really representative of kind of what we're seeing. The narrative that's dominating the news right now is who gets to control the information. As Elon Musk is in the process of acquiring Twitter, it looks like he's going to be able to purchase Twitter and turn it into a free speech zone, whatever that'll look like. Democrats are panicking. Liberals are panicking that they're losing the narrative because they love to create these echo chambers. They love to control the information. People don't realize Twitter is as influential as it is. A lot of the news narratives, even organizations like the Western Journal, we look at what's happening on Twitter to kind of, here's what the news narrative is right now. And Twitter and the left wing, board over there, and all of the leftists that are in charge of the algorithms and determining what gets flagged as disinformation, what gets removed from the platform. They've had control over everything. They've banned anyone who disagrees with their narratives, including Mike Lindell, who has had a pretty interesting week. So, he was Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow, who, he's massively popular among a lot of, conservatives, which makes a lot of sense. He comes off like a very blue-collar, charismatic guy. He's got a big bushy mustache. All of the best things that a Republican conservative influencer needs. So he was back on Twitter. There was this huge announcement, hey, I'm back. And then, Well, that didn't end so well, and we got a clip we're going to play for you right now about Mike Lindell talking about his return.
Hello, everyone at Twitter. This is Mike Lindell. I'm here to tell you about my new account here, at Mike J. Lindell. At Mike J. Lindell. That's the only account over here at Twitter that I'm using. All those other ones are fake accounts, and they've been using my name out there. So we started this account. Please share it with everybody you know. Let everybody you know so we can get the word out over here at Twitter in case they do take it down. And thanks a lot for helping out. Thank you, and God bless.
So within 5 minutes of posting that video, he had 20,000 followers. You know, not too long after that, he got up to 40,000 followers. And then, unfortunately, as you can see on the screen right now, his account was yet again, his new account was suspended by Twitter. And this really just helps it helps highlight everything we've just been talking about. Like, this is what they want. They want to be able to control who gives you the information. You know, Mike Lindell at times says some crazy things, but it's important for us to see those things. You know, if we're even going to contend with, you know, any sort of ideas, we need them to be out there. But yeah, Twitter doesn't want that. The left wing doesn't want that. The Biden administration doesn't want that.
I mean, guess what? Mike Lindell is not a politician. He's the CEO of MyPillow, which he created. He's very successful.
Yes.
And congratulations to him for doing
Yes.
that. That's great. But he's not a politician. He has opinions on politics, and there is no reason that he shouldn't be able to share those. And people can say, I agree or I disagree. There are plenty of athletes, celebrities, movie stars, whoever it is, who are not politicians, who make their opinions very known on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever, and those people aren't censored. And they say things that aren't true. I mean, you have LeBron James. He lied about Kyle Rittenhouse. I mean, there's countless examples of people lying about politics. But guess what? I've never called for those things to be taken down. We've sat here and talked on this show about how they're not true and how we disagree with them. But we've never said, you know what? LeBron James shouldn't be allowed to tweet this. He should have to take this down. No, he just should be called out if he says something that's not true.
And this gets to the heart of why they are so scared. You know, I have a Twitter account that's my non-political account that I just I follow artists and stuff, and it's kind of fun, and they're all super lefty. They are panicking like crazy on Twitter right now. Like, everyone's talking about how this is the end of everything, and it's, you know, it's all over. Right-wingers are going to be able to say whatever they want. Well, guess what, dude? You know, if all of our ideas are exposed and all of your ideas are exposed, we are pretty confident that we're going to win, okay? Mm-hmm. That's why they're running scared. That's why they're panicking. And looks like Twitter's going to become that place. It looks like because of, you know, new media, because of YouTube, because of how CNN is dying, you know, CNN Plus couldn't get off the ground, CNN, MSNBC, all these outlets are losing all their viewers. People are tuning into YouTube shows like this one, okay? They're looking for opinions from people that disclose their bias, that tell you, oh, this is where I'm coming from. You know, I'm coming from a Christian conservative perspective in our case. And this is what we think of what's going on in the news right now. That's what people are looking for. And old media is dying. And we're going to win this information war. You know, if everyone's given both sides of it, we have the truth on our side, and that tends to give us a pretty good advantage.
Yeah, that's such a great point that I've heard a lot of times, and I completely agree. Elon Musk is pro free speech. He's not inherently pro Republican over a Democrat. He's not going to say, I want Republican opinions to be heard and Democrat opinions to be silenced. That's not what he's about. He's about all the information being out there, and then Americans, voters, whoever's reading these things on Twitter to be able to make their own decisions. And you have to have, I mean, the left has to understand that their argument is so weak. That's the only reason that they would be acting like this, because no one is saying that we're going to prop up conservatives and Republicans and we're going to suppress Democrat opinions. No one's doing that. All we want is to have all the information out on the table and for a person to be able to make their own decision based on all the information. And the left is so scared of that idea because they understand that their argument is inherently not as good.
Yeah, and look, it's not a perfect scenario. You know, there are a lot of situations where rampant disinformation can be spread out there, but giving the choice to the people to determine what the truth is, that is the best possible of all options. If you don't do that, you're leaving it up to a bunch of super powerful, you know, oligarchs and you know, unelected officials and bureaucrats. You're letting them make the decisions. You're letting them determine what the truth is. we think you should determine what the truth is.
Yeah.
And looks like that's kind of the direction we're headed in for now, which is really exciting.
I think so. I think that's pretty much a good place to wrap up for today's episode. We like to share the truth on our website, on this podcast, and on our website at westernjournal.com. If you want to support what we're doing over there, read about these stories about Elon Musk acquiring Twitter, about this new disinformation board.
About Mike Lindell.
About Mike Lindell. We even have stories about that, and they're going to bring you the truth. And, you know, like we just talked about, some people don't want that information to get out. So Facebook doesn't want that information to get out. YouTube doesn't want that information to get out. And so the best way for you to be able to get that information straight to you is to subscribe at westernjournal.com/join. There's a couple of options for you there that you can look over, and that ensures that we don't have to go through a middleman like Facebook or YouTube or somebody who doesn't like us and doesn't want our information out there. It's going to come straight to you, so that would be a great option.
Yeah,
and it supports what we're doing here.
Yeah, these places, YouTube, Facebook, Google, they hate you for what you believe. Like, it's not just us. Like, we're just like telling the news from a perspective that you and us, that we and our audience all agree with. YouTube, Facebook, Google, they hate us for that, and they're doing everything we can to stop it, so help us out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also on YouTube, specifically, we talked about subscribing. That helps you out with our digital written content. YouTube specifically and Rumble, if you hit subscribe and you hit that bell icon so that they can notify you when we go live, that will ensure that you can know when we're having an episode of WJ Live, when we're going to be talking about these things, so that YouTube, Rumble, and any of these outlets, you're just making sure that you're not trusting them per se. You're trusting yourself, and you're trusting this is the information I want, and so I'm going to say I want to get notified when this is here, and I can watch it when I want to. So luckily we have that, and that's a great option to support us as well. So thank you for tuning in. We will be back here on Wednesday. WJ Live is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll be bringing you the latest stories of the day on Wednesday. And until then, have a great beginning of your week.